everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and it is day 6 of the Aether Revolt set reviews. We've only got one more day to go after this. Today we are going to be looking at every single gold card in the set, which isn't that many, only 14, and because there's so few, we will then tackle the first half of the artifacts, because there's so many. Tomorrow we'll finish up the artifacts and some final thoughts on the format. Of course, this is a limited only set review. You know these disclaimers by now. We're going to jump on into the first card. Up first is Ajani Unyielding. Ajani Unyielding is a 4 green-white planeswalker Ajani at Mythic, and he starts with 4 loyalty. He, of course, has 3 abilities, +2. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all non-land permanent cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. -2, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. -9, put 5 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control and 5 loyalty counters on each other planeswalker you control. So right away, usual planeswalker caveat, it's a damage sponge, it stresses your opponents out, it makes them do possibly inoptimal combat math and etc. And it likely has value, so regardless of what the text even says or what I'm about to tell you, at an F&M level draft, you're probably just gonna first pick it. End of story. Anyways, beyond that, Ajani's slightly expensive at 6 mana, but that didn't stop many other planeswalkers from being good and limited. Looking at you, Elspeth. Ajani's +2 is a decent card draw / filtering kind of thingy. You get to throw away all those lands on top at the cost of also throwing away non-creature spells, but hey, it's totally fine. Ajani's -2 is pure powerful removal. Your opponent gains some life, who cares? The fact that Ajani can also be a back-to-back kill spell just by -2ing past the turn, -2, kill Ajani, is also totally fine. It's a totally okay use of Ajani if you have to. Ajani's ultimate should just win the game unless you've been really behind or lacking a board state, which I would question how you got Ajani to 9. Do note that Ajani does not put counters on himself. So, you can't take Ajani to 10 and then -9 him and take him back up to 6. That's not going to happen. Still, a solidly, stupidly powerful alt that should just win you the game in very short order. All in all, a very easy first pick planeswalker that could only be slightly hampered by the cost if the format stays super fast with some decks, as it was in Kaladesh. But solid first pick, solid A. I like Ajani Unyielding quite a bit. Dark Intimations is up next. Dark Intimations is 2 blue, black, red, or 2 in a Grixis, sorcery at rare. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, then discards a card. You return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand, then draw a card. And then it's got some flavor text, which says, when you cast a Bolus Planeswalker spell, exile Dark Intimations from your graveyard. That planeswalker enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. There are no Bolus Planeswalker spells in this set. They don't exist. Next set, yeah, we're going to see one, almost 100% guaranteed. And of course, there is the old one from way back when. But as far as we're concerned in this format, that is pure flavor text. And not even the joking flavor text like I talk about on the Oath cards. This is literally irrelevant in this format. So what about the actual relevant text? Well, it's not that great either, primarily because A, you're not playing 3 colors. You're not playing 3 colors without being a green deck, which green is not part of the casting cost here. And doing all of this to at sorcery speed make your opponent sack a creature and discard a card so that you can bring one back if you have one to your hand and draw a card. Absolutely terrible. F-. This should be a last pick card. It does nothing that you want to be doing in limited. F-. Hidden Stockpile is up next. Hidden Stockpile is white-black for an enchantment at uncommon. It has Revolt, so at the beginning of your end step, if you revolted, you get a 1/1 servo. That's not great. However, pay 1 and sack a creature, scry 1. I think I like this. I think I rather like this. White-black doesn't really usually get repeatable scry all that often, but here it is. Sack a creature, scry. End of turn, you get a servo. In your upkeep, sack that servo and scry. End of turn, you get a servo, repeat. Now, the downside is that you can't sack the servo at the end of your opponent's turn because this checks the beginning of your end step. So that does hurt this a little bit because you do have to basically set aside a mana to scry every turn. because you're not going to untap that land. But still, this is kind of a cheap sack outlet, so it enables other revolt cards. You're getting your servo, which maybe helps you out for improvise or something, but really, for me, it's just the repeatable scry. I love scrying every time or every turn, and this helps me do that. I got to go with a B- on this. I really like this card. Maybe it's actually terrible, but I think it's pretty solid. So B- for Hidden Stockpile. Maverick Thopterist is up next. Maverick Thopterist is 3 blue-red for a creature human artificer at uncommon. It's 2/2. It has improvise, and when Maverick Thopterist enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. This seems fairly solid. It's 5 mana for a 4/4, 2 of which is 1/1 flyers, which is fine. Probably even better than Experimental Aviator slightly, which was the same cost, although it was 3 blue. The fact that you can maybe get this cheaper is cool, although one discount makes this even better for me. I'm totally fine paying 5 mana for this card. As it stands, I'm not apt to first pick it, especially if blue-red doesn't become more viable than it was in Kaladesh. But yeah, in a vacuum, I like this card. I like this card as like a B. In the format, if blue-red ends up not being that viable, obviously it drops. But from right now, I like this guy. I think he's pretty good. Solid B. Up next is Oath of Ajani. Ajani has joined the Gatewatch. Oath of Ajani is green-white, our first gold oath, for a legendary enchantment at rare. When Oath of Ajani enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Planeswalker spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. As always, the second ability is basically flavor text in limited. Not truly flavor text like Dark Intimations, but basically. The first ability, though, I like that quite a bit. Anthems are really good. We talked about this with Call for Unity. This is slightly less than an Anthem, because of course it only does it one time for creatures who are currently on the battlefield, and then it doesn't do it for new creatures. But it's so cheap in a color pairing that usually wants to have a bunch of creatures that I'm willing to go all in on this card and even first pick it. Slightly hurts that you do have to first pick a green-white card to get this, but I think it is still 100% first pickable. Pairing this with Aviary Mechanic or something and bouncing it and recasting it sounds disgusting. I like Oath of Ajani quite a bit. I'm going to go with an A- on it. Outland Boar is up next. Outland Boar is 2 red-green for a creature boar at uncommon. It's a 4/4. Outland Boar can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. It's a 4-mana 4/4 that can't be chump blocked or double blocked by a couple of bears. Totally fine. 100%. All in. Not a bomb. Not a super high pick. You're not going to first pick an Outland Boar. But if you're exploring either of those colors, I would pick this up right away. And it's probably a reason to go into Gruul. I like it a fair bit. It's a B-, no higher because I would never really first pick it. But yeah, B- for Outland Boar. Renegade Rallier is up next. Renegade Rallier is 1 green-white for a creature human warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/2 and it has Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, if you've revolted, you can return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This seems solid, but it also highlights my worry about Revolt creature enter the battlefield effects. A 3/2 for 3 is fine if I drop it on turn 3, but if I drop it on turn 3, it's not that likely that I'm going to have had Revolt active that turn, which means I'm not going to get the creature back, which means it's basically a vanilla or slightly less than vanilla creature. If I wait until turn 5 or 6 or 7 when I engineer that perfect, awesome Revolt turn, I get a 3/2 and a 2-drop on turn 6 or 7. What do I care about that? So honestly, I don't know how good this is going to be. I just don't know. It's going to be one of the cards that I look at to see how Revolt goes off. White, of course, is one of the colors that I think is going to most reliably be able to have its creatures be revolting. But I don't know. I'm going to start it to C+, a little bit harsh on it. But we'll see how Revolt actually shapes up. So C+ for now for Renegade Rallier. We've got another Renegade. Renegade Wheelsmith is up next. 1 red-white for a creature dwarf pilot at uncommon. It's a 3/2, and whenever Renegade Wheelsmith becomes tapped, target creature can't block this turn. 3/2s for 3 that make a creature unblockable when they attack are always solid. This one's even better in that if it crews a vehicle or in some other way becomes tapped, the can't block effect still happens. Very solid card. I'll pick kind of high mid pack, maybe late early pack, and the second that I know I'm Boros, I'm grabbing these. Every single one that I can get my hands on. I like it. Solid B for Renegade Wheelsmith. Rogue Refiner is up next. Rogue Refiner is 1 green-blue for a creature human rogue at uncommon. It's a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card and get 2 energy. This seems totally fine. Byway Courier is sort of similar to this from Shadows of Innistrad. It was a 3/2 that made a clue when it died, and so later on you could draw a card. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's a 3-mana 3/2 that draws you a card. Plus you get 2 energy. All parts of this are totally fine. If you're blue-green, it's extremely likely that you're going to want energy and draw cards, because who doesn't? Not quite as huge a pick as some of the other gold cards, but still very, very solid. Probably wouldn't take it in the first few picks of pack 1, but I would mid-pack and the second that I know that I am blue-green. So B- for Rogue Refiner. Spire Patrol is up next. Spire Patrol is 2 white-blue for a creature human soldier at uncommon. She's a 3/2, she has flying, and when Spire Patrol enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. I love all parts of this. It's a 3/2 flyer for 4. Why not? Getting to freeze a creature is totally fine as well. It's usually better at instant speed than it is at sorcery speed, but oh well, this is still pretty fine. Seems like an easy, relatively high pick for me. If I'm white or blue, I would totally grab this and go into blue-white flyers, especially because I do think that a pretty solid blue-white flyers deck exists in this format. I'll take every single one of these that I can get. Solid B. Well, we've seen the good guy Planeswalker. Time for the bad guy Planeswalker. Tezzeret the Schemer is up next. Tez is a 2 blue-black Planeswalker Tezzeret at Mythic. He's got 5 loyalty to start, making him above the Planeswalker vanilla test. +1, create a colorless artifact token named Ethereum Cell with, quote, tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. -2, target creature gets +X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 5/5. If this is your first time seeing a Tezzeret, Tezzeret is always very artifacty. If you don't have a high artifact count, you don't play Tezzeret. Again, Planeswalker caveat, it's a damage sponge, stresses out your opponent, probably has value attached to it. You're not ever taking this when you see it in an FNM draft. The +1 is pretty cool. Getting a battery for later use is nice. It ups your artifact count, can be used for improvise without having to sacrifice it. All kinds of things that Tezzeret and the blue-black artifact deck are going to want to do. His -2 is interesting in that it's conditional removal. You're going to want to have a sizable number of artifacts, but luckily if you're blue-black, you should, because that is the primary sort of archetype, I think, in this format, is blue-black artifacts. And boy, do I want to play it really, really bad with a Tezzeret. Anyways, his -2 is good. You should be able to at least get -2, if not -3, at which point you're looking to kill a lot of stuff that aren't straight-up bombs. I should also note at this point that Tezzeret probably isn't worth splashing if you're not blue-black artifacts, because if you're not blue-black artifacts, if you're black-red or black whatever, or blue whatever, you probably don't have the critical mass of artifacts to really justify splashing Tezzeret. So keep that in mind. Anyways, his -7's cool. You're going to have artifacts in the deck. That's the plan. And one by one, they're going to become 5/5s because they don't stop being 5/5s. Once they become a 5/5, they never, ever stop. This will take some time since they don't have evasion, they don't have trample or flying or anything like that, so your opponent can chump them for quite a while, but it still is probably a completely inevitable outcome at that point that you're going to win. All in all, I like Tezzeret quite a bit. He does require a specific deck. Luckily, if you're first picking him, you can build towards it. If you're finding him later in the draft and you're blue-black, you should already be on that plan anyways. The only place where you probably wouldn't take him in a competitive sort of realm is if you're one of these colors and you find him in pack 2 or pack 3. Pack 2, he might even be worth kind of pivoting a little bit if you're one of the colors. Anyways, be careful. Don't get too greedy with him, but I think he's very, very cool, especially, well, primarily, in that blue-black artifact deck. So A- for Tezzeret the Schemer. Tezzeret's Touch is up next. Tezzeret's Touch is 1 blue-black for an enchantment aura at uncommon enchant artifact. Enchanted artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 5/5 in addition to its other types. When enchanted artifact is put into a graveyard, return that card to its owner's hand. Without having flying or anything, I'm not sure that getting 1 random 5/5 is really all that special and worth a card and 3 mana and potentially just being removed. Now, the fact that it comes back to your hand is cool if it gets removed, but still, you're not getting a 5/5 back when you recast that artifact. You're getting back whatever it was, an implement or a puzzle knot or something. Probably powerful enough because of its low cost, though. Getting the artifact back when it dies is nice, as I said. I'll keep an eye on this. I feel like it could be high variance. You're going to face somebody who on turn 3 drops this on something that somehow has flying and suddenly you're dead in like 2 turns. But realistically, I think I'm going to start this at a C+. Weld Fast Engineer is up next. Weld Fast Engineer is 1 black-red for a creature, human artificer at uncommon. It's a 3/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So it's a 3/3 for 3, which is totally fine and always playable if you're black-red. How much better this gets depends on just how many artifact creatures you end up with, of course. Not getting a toughness boost means you're probably going to need to be very aggressive, which black-red pretty usually wants to be. Flinging those now 3/1 servos into trades with an opponent sounds fine to me. Like the Boar, I think this is a fine card that I'll snap up when I'm already red-black. I will consider snapping it up when I'm one of those colors, and I probably won't ever first pick it. So B- for Weld Fast Engineer. Our final gold card, but not our final card for this set review, we're going to do half the artifacts, is Winding Constrictor. Winding Constrictor is black-green for a creature snake at uncommon. It's a 2/3. If 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are placed on that permanent instead. Any counters, a +1/+1 counter, a velocity counter, any kind of counter, you get an extra 1 on the creature or artifact. If you would get 1 or more counters, you get that many of those counters +1 instead. That only matters for energy in this format. In other formats, it might matter for experience counters or poison counters, which is actually a downside. But as far as we're concerned, it's just energy. Also, fun fact, Winding Constrictor doesn't have Death Touch. I read this card, looked at this card, I wrote the text of this card out into my spreadsheet, and then rated this card as though it had Death Touch. I don't know why. It's much less good without the Death Touch. It's a 2/3 for 2, which is fine. I mean, it slightly beats the vanilla test cost, but that's not that much. The counters thing is where this is really going to live or die, and that, of course, depends on whether or not the counters deck exists, and it didn't really work that well in Kaladesh, and I don't necessarily know if it's going to work that well in Aether Revolt, especially with the lack of Fabricate that you're going to have. So I think Winding Constrictor might end up being hurt just a little tiny bit. As well, getting additional energy isn't really all that exciting in black-green. Green likes energy. Black kind of uses energy, but it's not really the energy deck. So I don't know about Winding Constrictor. I'm at kind of a C+ on it. I think it's probably fine if you're in those colors. You'll play it because it's a 2/3 for 2. It's filler. Slightly better than that if you can get some extra counters off of it. But I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I don't think it's that exciting, especially not without Death Touch. C+ for Winding Constrictor. All right, on to the artifacts. There's a lot of them. We're actually going to do slightly more than half of them because I'm going to do a cycle to finish out this video. Up first, we have Aegis Automaton. Aegis Automaton is part of a cycle of automatons. This was the white one. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact creature construct. It's an 0/3 at common, by the way. Pay 4 and a white, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. You're not playing this card if you're not white. It's an F if you're not white. And if you are white, it's still not very good. As I've mentioned, I think Revolt is going to be kind of like Madness, where you want your Revolt enablers to be really cheap, preferably free. So I don't think that I'm playing this to enable Revolt. I'm not going to hold up 5 mana all the time to act as sort of removal insurance. Maybe this could work in a really controlling deck, but it's no Sky or Consulate Skygate. I think this in a white deck is at best a D+ that you're going to sideboard in, maybe if you need to survive a couple of extra early turns, and if you're not white, it's a straight F. D+ for Aegis Automaton. Aether Sphere Harvester is a 3 generic mana artifact vehicle at rare. It's a 3/5. It's got flying. It gives you 2 energy when it enters the battlefield. Pay an energy to give it lifelink until end of turn. And crew, what, 4? 3? No, crew 1. This is another ridiculous vehicles, and honestly, these crew 1 vehicles are one of my most hated aspects of Kaladesh. Smuggler's Copter, really overpowered. At least the other 1 crew cost vehicles weren't too bad. We're going to look at another one that I think is going to be just flat out the horrifying scourge of the format later in this video, or actually, sorry, it'll be in tomorrow's video. Anyways, this is just disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. There's no chance that you are not snap first picking this every single time you see it. It goes in every single deck ever, and it's just going to fly in for a ton of damage, blocks insanely well, gains you a bunch of life. Disgusting. Solid A+. Like, there's literally no discussion with this card. I don't know any other cards that you would really pick over this in most packs. So solid A+ for Aether Harvester. I expect to feel very unhappy when I see this come down on the other side of the battlefield. And is arguably a good reason to main deck... well, no, this being rare is not a good reason to main deck Artifact Hate. The one we'll see later is a good reason to main deck Artifact Hate. Anyways, A+ for Aether Harvester. Augmenting Automaton is up next. Augmenting Automaton is the black one. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact creature construct at common. It's a 1/1, pay 1 and a black. Augmenting Automaton gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is very similar to Sludge Crawler, which was a card that wasn't too bad from Oath of the Gatewatch. It was the same as this, except it cost 2 generic mana to pump it as opposed to 1 and a black, and it had Ingest, which was a relevant mechanic in the set. Not having that extra mechanic and having the color restriction makes this much less good for sure. And Sludge Crawler was only like a C+ to begin with. This is just filler bordering on unplayable most of the time, I think. In a black deck, this is like a C-, maybe even a D+. And of course, in a non-black deck, this is a straight F. Yeah, Augmenting Automaton, not that good. Barricade Breaker is up next. Barricade Breaker is 7 generic mana for an artifact creature Juggernaut. It's an uncommon. It's a 7/5 with Improvise, so it can be cheaper. And Barricade Breaker attacks each turn if able. Meh. It's too expensive. No trample as well makes this feel really mediocre. Don't get blinded by the 7 power either. 5 toughness is really low. An easy little double block simply kills this thing. Even with a big discount, I'm super out on this. I think this is the improvised trap card of the set that people will initially massively overrate. Newer players will take very highly, and it just won't get them there. I'm not touching this to start at least, and probably not ever. I'll give it a D. It's not going to get an F because, yeah, maybe you have to play it sometimes, but straight up D for Barricade Breaker. Cogwork Assembler is up next. Cogwork Assembler is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature assembly worker, so self-assembler can get it. It's an uncommon, it's a 2/3, and you can pay 7 generic mana to create a token that's a copy of target artifact. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. 7 is asking a lot, but you do get to target any artifact. You can steal your opponent's Gear Hulks or whatever. But it's probably just way too much to put into it, especially because it requires something better than just copying a Cogwork Assembler. Just copying itself isn't going to do anything. There has to be something else going on for this to do anything worthwhile. It'll be fun to try out on a Wacky Wednesday or something, but I think this is just a trap card that I'll avoid. I'm going to go with a D on it as well. Up next is a card that I've briefly alluded to several times, Consulate Dreadnought. 1 generic mana for an artifact vehicle at uncommon. It's a 7/11. Crew 6. This is going to be the card that I rage against the most. It's bad. It's really, really, really bad. It's an F. Spoiler alert. Yeah, someone's going to, on turn 3, throw that stupid siege modification on it, and suddenly there's a 10/11 trample, or sorry, not trample, first strike on turn 3, and it's going to be obnoxious, but don't do it. It's just not gonna work in any way reliably enough for you to actually win. It'll be a great story, but you're gonna lose way more than you win. Crew 6 is just way too much for this vehicle, especially one that has absolutely 0 evasion. If this ever gets that flying enchantment on it, it's gonna be a problem, but again, don't do it. This card doesn't do anything otherwise. Bad. Straight up F. I am out on Consulate Dreadnought. Consulate Turret is up next. Consulate Turret is 3 generic mana for an artifact at common. Tap, you get an energy. That's cool. Tap, pay 3 energy. Consulate Turret deals 2 damage to target player. This is just too slow. Way too slow. Taking a turn off to play an artifact that does absolutely nothing but make a single energy a turn is a bad idea. Eventually getting to do 2 damage to a player every few turns or so probably is just way too slow as well. I don't think this is playable. There's just way too many better ways to enable energy or artifact counts or improvise or killing your opponent or whatever it is you're trying to do with this turret. There's a billion better things to do. D- on this. I don't think you should be playing it. Crackdown Construct is next. Crackdown Construct is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature constructed uncommon. It's a 2/2. Whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or creature that isn't a mana ability, Crackdown Construct gets +1/+1 until end of turn. For any newer players out there, a mana ability is when you tap a creature to make mana. It's nothing else. Activated abilities are the abilities that have a cost, whether it be mana or tapping or sacrificing, a colon, and then the effect. Yeah, there's a nifty little infinite pump combo in Standard with this and Wandering Fumarole, but in Limited, I'm out. It's totally terrible. It's a 2/2 for 4, which is ridiculously overcosted, and generally you're going to pump it, what, once? Maybe twice if you're super lucky. 4 mana for a 2/2 that sometimes is a 3/3 and rarely is a 4/4 just seems super, super, super bad. D-. I'm out on Crackdown Construct. All right, time to stop handing out Ds with Daredevil Dragster. 3 generic mana for an artifact vehicle at uncommon. It's a 4/4. At the end of combat, if Daredevil Dragster attacked or blocked this combat, put a velocity counter on it. Why does it get velocity if it blocked? Anyways, then if it has 2 or more velocity counters on it, sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. Crew 2. This one seems a little bit hard to judge. A 4/4 crew 2 on turn 3, attacking on turn 4. Sounds pretty fine. It can probably even attack on turn 5 without worrying of being, chump blocked or killed or anything like that straight up. At which point it turns into 2 cards. Which is an aggressive red-white style, which is what an aggressive red-white style deck is exactly in the market for, is getting more cards on turn 4 or turn 5. I think that makes this pretty okay. It's probably like a C+, high mid-pack pick maybe. Definitely not for every deck though. If you're not absolutely going to be dropping a couple creatures by turn 4 and turning this on, and planning to attack a lot, then you probably don't play this card. Going to keep my eye on it because it could be much better or much worse, but let's start it at a C+. Filigree Crawler is up next. Filigree Crawler is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature insect at common. It's a 2/2. When Filigree Crawler dies, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. It turns into a beautiful mechanical butterfly. Still, it's a 2/2 for 4, which is asking an awful lot of me. Probably asking too much of me to actually play it. Even if I do get a 1/1 after chumping with this or something, I don't really care. I'll cut it pretty liberally. It's not going to get a D, it's going to get a C- though. I'm not going to go out of my way to play this. So C- for Filigree Crawler and its beautiful mechanical butterfly self. Foundry Assembler is up next. It's a 5 generic mana artifact creature assembly worker, again fetchable with self-assembler. It's a common, it's a 3/3, and it has improvise. Cheating out a vanilla 3/3 is not really cheating. If I don't pay 3 for this, I don't care. This just doesn't seem very good to me at all. I like self-assembler way more than I like this one. I don't think that you'll really play these outside of desperate filler level. I'm going to go with a C- on it, probably even a little bit lower. Yeah, cheating out a 3/3 is not cheating. It's just playing boring Magic. Gonti's Aether Heart is up next. Gonti's Aether Heart is 6 generic mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic. Whenever Gonti's Aether Heart or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get EE, 2 energy. Pay EEE, 8 energy, and exile Gonti's Aether Heart. Take an extra turn after this one. Everybody loves the idea of taking an extra turn, and it's rarely ever worth it in Limited. Even in Cube with Time Walk, the best extra turn card ever, it's only great if you're heavily abusing it and recurring it over and over and over again. Getting a single extra turn for 6 mana and 8 energy is just not worth it. It's almost like a reverse fog. You're going to remember the times that you won with that extra turn, and you're going to forget all the times that this did nothing for you, just like with fog. I don't know. I don't think this is playable at all. At all. I think it's garbage. F. Straight up F for Gonti's Aether Heart. Well, let's get back to disgusting vehicles. Heart of Kiran is next. Heart of Kiran is 2 generic mana for a legendary artifact vehicle at Mythic. It's a 4/4 for 2. It has flying. It has vigilance. It has some flavor text down at the bottom. You may remove a loyalty counter from a planeswalker you control rather than pay Heart of Kiran's crew cost. That doesn't matter in Limited. And its crew cost is 3. At least 3 is slightly reasonable, but this is still a 4/4 vigilance for 2, which can attack on turn 3 if you drop a 3x creature. This is Limited, so as I said, the bottom is flavor text. It's just disgusting. It's an easy snap first pick. It's arguable. if this is better or worse than the Aether Sphere Harvester. I think they're kind of close and limited, but this one is just so good. Easy snap first pick, goes in every single deck you'd ever play. You see it, you take it. I think I'll give this an A. I really like Aether Sphere Harvester's 1 crew cost and lifelink ability, so I will give Aether Spire Harvester the slight edge here, but Heart of Kiran still solid A, snap first pick. Hope of Girapur is up next. Hope of Girapur is a 1 generic mana legendary artifact creature Thopter at rare. It's a 1/1. It has flying. Sacrifice Hope of Girapur. Until your next turn, target player who was dealt combat damage by Hope of Girapur this turn can't cast non-creature spells. I don't care. It's a 1/1 flyer for 1, which is fine, but generally unplayable. And it's an artifact which counts for something, I guess. The effect, though, who cares? Limited is a game of creatures. Taking your opponent off non-creature spells for a turn is generally meaningless. This just seems bad and not something that I'd include unless I was desperate for artifacts or creatures, or if I got insanely lucky and in pack 3 picked up a Chief of the Foundry or Master Trinketeer, because suddenly having a 2/2 flyer for 1 seems pretty good. But no, I'm out. I'm totally out on Hope of Girapur. D. All right, time to go through the implement cycle, and then we'll be done for the set review. Implement of Combustion is up first. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact at common. It does nothing. But if you pay red and sacrifice Implement of Combustion, it deals 1 damage to target player. And when it leaves the battle, or sorry, not when it leaves the battlefield, when it goes to a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. 1 damage only to players. Nope, do not want that. It's not worth a card, even if it replaces itself. F. Straight F. Terrible card. Implement of Examination is up next. It's 3 generic mana for an artifact at common. Pay a blue, sack it, draw a card. When it leaves the battlefield, or sorry, when it goes to a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So I think I like this one the most. It's like an inspiration with sort of a layaway format for its cost. This is the one that I'd probably be most willing to play, especially as blue is really desperate for artifacts in this set. Still, it's a very late pick and not always playable. It's kind of like a C- or so. Yeah, these all enable improvise and they up your artifact count, but don't play bad cards to enable other cards. Play good cards, because there's plenty of artifacts in the set that are better than these ones that you can more reliably get and play. Implement of Ferocity is up next. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact at common. Pay a green, sacrifice Implement of Ferocity, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery, and of course draw a card when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. A counter at sorcery speed is not worth 2 mana and a card. It's way too slow, way too unimpactful for me, and it's just not worth it. Not as terrible as the red one, quite, so it's going to get a D-, but still pretty bad. White's up next with Implement of Improvement. Implement of Improvement is 1 generic mana for an artifact at common. Pay a white, sacrifice it, you gain 2 life, and then draw a card when it goes to the graveyard. 2 life and a card for 2 mana and a card, not worth it in any way, shape, or form. I would never play this card ever. I just am not going to play it. It enables Revolt. It enables Improvise, blah, 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 blah. White has so many better ways of enabling Revolt than this card. Straight up F. I think it's terrible. Don't touch it. Our final card of the Implement cycle and our final card of this video is Implement of Malice. Implement of Malice is 2 generic mana for an artifact at common. Pay a black, sack it, target player discards a card. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. When Implement of Malice is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Sorcery speed card discard is not really my thing or anybody's thing. I think most of these implements are pretty bad, as I've said. Obviously, they're the trap to make players play bad cards to enable their other cards, and I've told you over and over and over again, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm not willing to make the leap to play most of these. The most playable to me is the blue one, and even that one I think goes in very specific decks. The rest, you either got fooled by these cards or you are really desperate and the draft didn't go very well for you. Straight F on Implement of Malice. So that's going to wrap it up for the first half of the artifacts and the gold cards. Let me know what cards you are super excited about. There's a lot of really amazing ones in the gold cards. and a lot of really bad ones in the artifacts. But of course, interspersed in those are some ridiculous vehicles, and we'll see another one tomorrow. You guys all know which one I'm talking about. Anyways, as always, if you enjoy the videos, click that thumbs up icon. It helps the discoverability of the channel. Click subscribe if you haven't already. There's going to be a ton of Aether Revolt release content over the next couple of weeks, plus my usual weekly series, Spiky Saturdays, Wacky Wednesdays, Crack Pack Tuesdays, Top 10 Thursdays, etc. So make sure you do all of that. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. You can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeak. That's LEEK, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at Facebook.com/TheManaLeak, Patreon.com/TheManaLeak if you want to become a backer, and Twitch.tv/TheManaLeak. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for the final set review.